Today on the show, I have my good friend Kelly to talk with us about what it's like to be an Enneagram Type 9. Kelly and I have been friends for a number of years, and I just have to say that I am so grateful for her and her wisdom. Nines have this beautiful quality of being able to sit and listen for a long time. They don't rush people. And I have benefited from Kelly just sitting and listening to me for a long time. And I so appreciate that about her. So, hello, Kelly. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Wendy. Your words about listening applied as much to yourself. I have benefited from you listening for hours of conversation, which I've so enjoyed in your living room.
Yes,
With our other
we have
together.
had long conversations over
Mhm.
coffee many a times,
Yes.
and I miss those days very much.
Yeah. In particular, what we're talking about today, the Enneagram.
Yes, we talked a lot. We have talked a lot about the Enneagram.
Yes.
We've learned about it together
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
in different ways, but I've
Yeah.
always really appreciated you being willing to
Mhm.
talk about it so much and really investigate it as I've been on my journey of,
Yeah.
being certified as a Enneagram professional and all of that. So you've
Yeah.
listened to my stories over and
I
over and
know
over.
it's so fun to see that growth and development and change as you've gone into it professionally coaching, and then for myself, more the personal mastery side of
Mhm.
seeing it in my personal life.
Right. Yeah. So before we jump into the Enneagram, can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, I am a I'm an Enneagram Type 9 with the subtype of self-preservation,
Mhm.
and one day you might get into that a little more. But those subtypes are very interesting to know. In addition to your straight up number.
Absolutely. It changes the nuanced way you can understand your type structure by understanding subtype. But yes, we'll get
Yeah.
into that later.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that right off the bat. And then, so I love learning, exploring, continually developing in my personal spiritual life. And that has been a long time pursuit of mine, largely inspired by my own grandmother, who modeled that for me. She's always been a learner and from books and from people and from courses. And sometimes inadvertently, sometimes on purpose, I have followed her example and done that throughout my life. So where I'm sometimes just seen as bookish, and I have a million books on my shelves. Um, I don't necessarily enjoy books for their own sakes. They always lead me somewhere,
Oh.
inner journey. So that's who I am on the more basically on the inside that you may never know if you saw me in person.
Mhm.
And then outwardly, I am in relationship. I have a husband and I have two kids that we're raising, two boys. Interestingly, by adoption, and so I can call myself an adoptive mom, and love talking to and sharing stories with other parents who have gone that way with building their family.
I
I
love
think.
that. Yeah,
Mhm.
your boys are just awesome.
Mhm. They're dynamos.
Yes. For sure.
Keep me busy.
Yeah. So I see underneath, if people are watching, they're going to see it says CNC under your name.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
That is certified nutritional counselor, and that's my professional certifications I've pursued in the past. Oh, it's probably been 10 years now since I began that course of study that developed into study into naturopathy or naturopathy, as some people call it. And so I'm certified as a doctor of naturopathy, not in the clinical sense of going to the doctor and getting a prescription, but in the classical sense of training people to how to eat and how to develop their own health schemes, health patterns into more health into better ways.
Yeah, it's a kind of like a health coach in a way, where
Basically,
you're
yeah.
helping people understand themselves and like what's happening inside their bodies in that
Mhm,
way. And
mhm.
that's neat.
Yes.
Do you have an interesting story about that? Someone that you worked
Mm.
with that was a case maybe that that you found super interesting?
Yeah, I remember one of my first cases, first clients, and she um it was fun to I developed my own intake personal health story forms and helped her to identify put together basically it's interesting to put together information that the client has already gathered from their other doctors, uh,
Mhm.
other experience, usually over a long period of time, um, and then to help her sort that out and to put just a couple things into practice. So what I love specializing in is simplifying where things seem um, overwhelming or too complicated or
Mhm.
um, like you could spend way too much money on too many supplements. Um,
Right.
yeah, so that's
I
that's what.
have been one of those people, and maybe I
Mhm.
still am a little bit.
Right.
I
Yes.
like supplements, and
Too easy.
whether they're doing something or not, they make me feel better. So,
That's right. Yeah.
all right. Now let's get into the Enneagram. When did you first learn about it? And did you know your type right away?
Let's see. I believe my very first introduction to it was with my friend Maggie, um, many years ago when before we moved to Yuma, and she was just reading about it, and she said, "Hey, look at this! This is interesting." And so I did, and I read the book, and we were discussing it together. But it took quite a while to find my type. I thought I was several other things at first. Um, Nine was the very last thing I wanted to be or be found participating in. So it took me taking I found that there were some free tests online, and they actually turned out to be right in my case. It's not always that way for many people. And then I took two more professional tests later, all of which confirmed the same number. And I went back and read more about it. And yes, I've been working working
Yeah.
on that ever
Yeah,
since.
it's not uncommon for nines at all to relate to think that there's something about all the types
Mhm,
that they resonate with, because they have the ability to see many different points of view. And so it's like, oh, I
mhm.
can see that, and I can see that, and I can see that. And if you're looking at a diagram of the Enneagram, the nine sits on the top.
That's
And
right.
some theory says that they're the ones that are able to see all of it, like
Mhm,
in an interesting way. And that ability to really mediate is one of
mhm,
the gifts of the nine, of being able to mediate, because they can see
mhm,
all different sides, and
mhm.
oh, that's a good point, and that's a good point. And so it's not uncommon for nines to have a hard time. My husband is also a nine, and he was three different types before
That's
before
of
he
course it was.
landed on nine. And
Yeah.
he had to kind of try them out for a little while.
Mhm.
It was like, and they
Yeah.
just didn't sit right. And so ultimately it was that kind of giving in. And that's true for all of us. Like, we don't want to be the type that we are, because when we really see it for what it is, we're like, wow, that I don't really like that about me. So
Yeah.
I don't really want that to be true.
Mhm.
And if you're going to be honest with yourself, you just have to own that. And that's then gives you a place to start making some changes in life.
Right. I love what you said, trying it on.
Hmm.
It's kind of a good practice to do when you're exploring the Enneagram. Let's try this on for a minute.
It is. And it's okay to do that. You
Mhm.
know, um, I knew my type right away.
Did you?
I did. And that's also not uncommon for fours, right?
Okay.
Fours spend a lot of time inside themselves, roaming around.
Mm,
Um, and so I was really familiar with what's happening inside of me. And
mhm,
so then when I thought written out, I was like, oh yeah, that I don't like that, but I can admit that that's true.
mm.
So
Did you like that? Did you like that description? Was that resonance helpful to you to feel understood?
it really was, because you know so much of my life, I have felt like I'm just odd. Like there's something different and weird about me. Like I
Mm,
don't really quite fit in. And so then reading that in relation to type 4, it really gave me permission to be much kinder to myself and be like, oh, okay, it's okay. So having big emotions and feeling a lot of things is okay. Like
mhm.
maybe I don't have to hide that as much
Right.
because it's not wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I grew up with the message of nobody really cares how you feel, so just shut up.
Mm,
And so you learn how to do that, and I learned how to just keep everything inside, but it didn't mean I wasn't feeling anything.
right.
Just because I wasn't showing it didn't mean I wasn't feeling it.
You
And
became maybe good at masking or hiding.
very much so. Very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that you have been on an Enneagram growth journey for quite some time.
Mhm.
So I thought for the sake of our conversation today that I would ask you some more advanced questions, if that's okay.
All right. We'll try to get in there.
You're like, okay.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. So first, let's talk about the passion of type in general. So for all types, the passion is the hard to avoid emotional pattern, and it gets disguised in many, many, many ways. But it's our default kind of go-to way of operating. It's the emotional pattern. So
Mm,
for example, I mentioned that I'm an Enneagram type 4 and my passion is envy. Now, when I first heard this, I didn't resonate with it at all. I would not have described myself as an envious person. But when I began to pay attention, I started to see how I compare myself to everyone
mm,
all the time.
okay.
The comparing mind for the 4 is the clue that envy is happening. They're,
Got.
they're like one and the same.
Mhm.
So it kind of goes something like this. I compare myself to someone or something. I feel like I'm not enough and that I'm missing whatever quality I perceive that that other person has.
Mm,
And then that confirms that I'm deficient, that there's something wrong with me. And then the story goes on. Well, if I had what they had, then maybe I would be successful, or maybe I would be happy, or maybe I would be insert whatever.
right. Sure. It
And
could be any. It's just whatever your mind is devising at the time, or your heart is. You would think.
yes,
Yeah.
but it begins with comparison.
Mhm.
And then the story evolves from there. And it's happening all the time. And when I'm honest with myself, I can see that this pattern has been there my whole life.
Mhm.
So seeing the passion at work, whatever your type is, seeing the passion at work it requires you being willing to really look hard at how it shows up in your everyday life.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the passion of type 9 is called sloth, and it relates to doing all possible actions but the right one.
Mhm.
And this is not to be confused with lazy. Nines are not lazy, not at all. So sloth means lack of action on behalf of self. It shows up and is as an aversion to being aware of what you want and desire. It's like you're going to sleep to yourself. Like I'm going to turn off my awareness to what I want, and that is in Enneagram theory how sloth is defined. Does
Okay.
that make sense to you? Like you're like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true, and I had to like trust that it's true, and then see how that pattern shows up in my life. Like you're saying, the pattern of envy. For me, that's a little more easy to see even than say a pattern of sloth. Well, goodness, what does that mean if I'm busy all the time? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember you saying, like, when I first read that, I was like, I'm lazy. Like
Mhm,
you
mhm.
interpret it that way as like,
Right.
oh, and like trying kind of defining yourself as like, oh, I'm a lazy person. And
Mhm.
you're like, but I'm not lazy. So how do I make sense of those two things together?
Yeah.
And but sloth or passion for all type, it's more subtle than that.
Oh
And
yeah. Very.
it's happening all the time. So it can be really hard to see because it's such a habitual way of
Right.
being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is another word for it indolence, or is that something?
Nope. So that's the indolence is the fixation.
Okay, that's the other.
And yeah, and we'll get into that. But one feeds the other.
Okay, they are.
And
Yeah,
they
they
yeah,
line.
they're closely
Mhm,
related.
mhm.
So like for type 4, envy, and then the fixation is melancholy. And
Uh,
those two things really go closely together.
Gotcha.
Just like that, the passion and fixation for all types are really closely related.
Okay, that's really cool. I hadn't seen it that way. Thank you, Wendy. That's
Yeah.
a helpful little bridge there.
Yeah.
Of course, I've heard that a million times, and just now it's like that's what that is. It's the I have the sloth inwardly, and then the mental idea is I experience that as indolence.
Yes.
That's what my decision making apparatus starts doing. Get you go indolent towards your what you need to be doing, your what your
Yeah.
heart wants.
Yeah.
Needs.
So
Mhm.
indolence is the fixed belief that I am not important.
Right.
For the 9, indolence is I am not important. And so there's this fixed belief,
Mm-hmm.
mindset that I'm not important, and that informs the sloth.
Yes.
Like, if I believe I'm not important, then why would I act on behalf of myself?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you see what I mean? Like how the 2
Mhm.
things go
Yeah.
together, and
Yeah.
it just becomes cyclical like that.
Mhm. For a fair comparison, can we go back to the 4 and say, okay, does the melancholy come after the envy or vice versa? Would you say?
Right. So melancholy is often thought of as an emotion, but in
Mm-hmm.
Enneagram theory, melancholy is defined as a fixed thought that something is missing.
Mm.
So it's that there's something missing. There's a belief that there's something missing,
Mm-hmm.
and then that triggers envy.
Gotcha.
Remember how I was describing the comparing mind? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like identifying that something's missing and I don't have that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it becomes an envious like cycle, like I
Sure.
described
Yeah. Yeah.
earlier. Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
what you start doing and experiencing, and
right.
yeah, one
Yeah.
feeds.
So indolence for the 9, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not important. That fixed belief,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I believe I'm not important, then why would I do anything for myself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Or take action upon the thing that I decided at some point was a good thing to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So so let's stay on sloth still. I want, if you
Mm-hmm.
can give us some examples of how sloth shows up in your life.
Yeah, it's a sneaky thing, so it's very hard for me to pinpoint. Except by more recently, I've learned that you can start to identify it somatically or in your body,
Mhm.
and so one of the habitual things. There's stereotypical things that 9s are known for: wanting to take a nap or have lots of blankets, or seeking comfort seeking.
Mhm.
Um, the it was a good day when I realized with some of the habits I had of I have this list of things that I had that were important to do that I wrote down. However, I'm going to go make myself a sandwich and have a cup of coffee because that's easier. That'll give me instant comfort. Like I
Mhm.
know that in my body, and then it will and I'll just put this list off, and then maybe I'll do it tomorrow, or maybe if you keep putting it off, it doesn't happen at all. So then you keep doing that, and then you'll find years later you never actually got that business started, or you never did that painting, or you never took your kid out to the movies. Like it could be a
Mhm.
little thing or a big thing. um, and that is, I think, if that's more connected to the sloth part of passion. Like you had this seed of an idea that you wanted to accomplish, and then to substitute have a it's almost a deadly substitute of these things in the moment that you do instead. Or or another good example would be part of the staying busy, looking busy on the outside is it's so much easier to do things for others. So like, of course, kids, you can always do something more for your children. They can take up all my time. and they can, from literally putting my feet on the ground in the morning to bedtime. And then, now my oldest one stays up later. So then, then that extends past bedtime. And then I'm watching a movie with him instead of, the thing I should be reading right now pertaining to my, job that I was doing. So,
I think it would be good to just interject that nines are other focused, just to give some context to the listeners, right? Nines are other focused, meaning that they put a lot of their energy outside of themselves on the other people in their lives and what they need, what they want, what they desire, and can completely lose touch with themselves. It's called merging. So the nine merges with somebody or an idea and can have a difficult time locating their own opinion. So like if you as a nine have a hard time locating your opinion, then everybody else's opinions become your opinion.
Yes.
So this maybe this idea that you had of like, oh, that's interesting. What I want to ask is, do those ideas and that clarity come to you when you're alone?
Yes, I do. I feel better when I'm alone and I can pay complete attention to my ideas, my feelings. And you can practice meditation that way, getting back into your body. Breathing's a key attribute that I learned to experience through the first retreat that I took, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. So for all these years, I've been breathing up in my chest, and sometimes I notice it, but not very often. And even to this day, I'll still catch myself doing that, and I need to deepen it. I need to go down into the belly, full breath for the full.
That's where your power is.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Out.
Yeah.
But it's so simple as not breathing deeply enough, or like that's to me a way that I'm not considering myself as, girl, take a breath, like let yourself breathe completely.
Right.
And
and for all those other nines out there, like the best thing a nine can do for themselves is to spend time alone with no distractions, no phone, no kids, no spouse, no nothing. Just to then consider like what's going on inside of me. Because as soon as a distraction, even the slightest movement in their environment, like they come out, their energy goes out, and it's this gathering up of the energy that you've pushed outside of yourself and pulling it back in to be like, okay, what do I want? Who am I? How am I going to move forward with what I want in my life? And how can I move into action?
Right.
That is the remedy of sloth, which we'll get into in a minute, right? What's the remedy of sloth and what's the remedy of indolence?
Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, I do love spinning. I kind of have always done that as a practice inadvertently. Like I didn't know that was good for me, but I felt that it was good. And so, yes, I do I've always journaled and taken my tea time or my coffee time and done that. And now to discover that is a worthy practice I need to protect and guard and make for now in a busier time of life. I have to.
That's what I was going to say. The challenge for you now is then to do that more and then to revisit those ideas and then put them into motion.
Right. Yeah.
Instead of just continuing with, oh, I'll write about this today, or I'll write about that today, even though you're spending time alone, it still can be a form of numbing out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Just, be paying attention to that. Okay. So let's move on then to fixation, which we've talked already a little bit about. The fixation of indolence is the fixed belief that I'm not as important as others. And this leads the type 9 to devalue themselves and to go against their own interests, which was kind of what we were just describing. This, oh, I have an idea, but I don't ever do anything with it. Because the belief is that I'm not important, so why would I do anything with it, right? So it's like we can start to see this pattern. So what can you tell me about what indolence means to you and how you have noticed that this fixed thought? Because passion is hard to see, and fixation is even harder to see, to be honest with you. Like we can, and so when I'm working with a client in their Enneagram journey, first we start with like just the basic type, like okay, what is the type structure and what's happening there, and then start to move into passion. And working on fixation doesn't come until later because it's so difficult to connect and see actually happening in life. So up to this point, like what have you learned about indolence and how have you seen that operating in your life?
I think it's helpful to start with the point, the principle of, or the habit of, as you said, not seeing yourself as important. Because that thought does rattle around in my consciousness over the years. So for myself, and from what I've learned, most other nines experience this, that they will do almost undermine themselves and any chance to be seen as important to go the other direction. And there's many various little reasons for that. It could be just that, yeah, it's a lot of trouble. If you get important, then you've got to keep it up. It could be a lot of work. It could be, but the bottom line is what I've recently learned has to do with personal power and realizing that I need to first see myself as important as all the other people that I have put before myself. And then, and not let that be defined by other people. Stop searching for other people to tell you, oh, you're important, or, oh, you come to my party, or include me. It's easy for, I think it's my ego self to want somebody to see me or want to have me with them or to extend that invitation. But they don't really know that. Maybe sometimes, in other words, like sometimes you need to be in charge of putting yourself out there. You need to be in charge of making things happen in the sense of you go participate. You go, if somebody's asking for volunteers to, host a baby shower, well, sign up for it. Like, just go do it. And yes, your name's going to be right there on the invitation, and you're going to be the one hosting, and you're going to be the one known for it. And that's a small example.
And does that feel exposing to have even your name on the invitation? Does that feel exposing?
Sometimes it feels like a lot of responsibility. Sometimes it feels like somebody might critique me and I might be found wanting. Sometimes it's like, it feels very definite. Like, oh, there I am. Yes, I have to show up. I have to do this thing, and I've got to figure out how to do it.
So what is it like for you? Is it a commitment thing? Like I'm saying yes to something I don't really want to say yes to, and now I have to follow through because my name's on the invitation. And maybe you didn't check in with yourself that you actually really wanted to do that thing. That's a pattern of nines, right? It's like they say yes to a lot of things because they don't know really whether they want to, and they are in the kind of people pleasing category. I don't want to upset people. I don't want to lose connection with the important people in my life. So I'm just going to be agreeable and accommodating. And this person that I really love and want to be close to has asked me to host a baby shower, and I just
nodded my head.
Yes, without even checking in with yourself to see, do I have time for that? Like, is there, and then it's definite, and oh, now I have to follow through, and maybe I don't want to. and then that breeds some resentment and
Mhm.
anger.
Yes.
And that is a
Yeah.
pattern for type nines.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And on the other hand, I have once I started knowing that about my ego pattern, that I could do the exact same thing, but with entirely different intentions. So it's not about the baby shower itself. It's not about the responsibility or the thing you signed up for, because you could be doing it with opposite intentions, right?
Mhm.
So on the, one day, myself signed up for it, just nodding in agreement, like, oh, this would be a good thing for my community, for them to have a baby shower for this person. And
Mhm.
therefore, I need to do that. Like, I should. So I shoulded myself into it.
Mhm.
Um, and on the other hand, then I've also practiced doing the exact same thing with my own initiation. Like, nobody else had to do it or wanted to or asked me to, and I just initiated it. And that feels very different when I take it on out of my own preference.
Mm. Because you chose it for yourself.
Hmm. Or because I love the other person,
Yeah.
or some more positive choosing of it instead of
That's a really good example.
falling into it. Yeah.
And even just in your description of that, the way you were talking about it, like you had more energy when you were giving the second example.
Mm. Hmm.
And it was really subtle, right? It's that subtle shift in your posture and the
Uh-huh.
subtle shift in even just the way you were speaking about it. Of
Mm.
like, instead of just nodding my head and saying yes,
Hmm.
I'm choosing it.
Hmm.
I'm choosing something that for me and my intention, you used the word intention, my
Hmm.
intention was different. And that
Yes.
changed your whole body when you
Yeah.
were even just giving that example.
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you feel that inside? Like
Yeah. Yes.
not a feeling as an emotion, but the feeling of sensing,
Hmm.
sensing the intention.
Yeah. It's a very powerful difference of
Mhm.
your intention. Yeah. Like you say, like you noticed, that it creates a different kind of energy in you. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. I like that. All
Yeah.
right. So let's move on to like, okay, well, what do we do with all of this?
Hmm.
Right? What is so whether you're out there listening or watching, whatever your type might be, you may be wondering, like, okay, that's all cool and neat, but
Hmm.
what do we do about this? Do we just like keep perpetuating these patterns that aren't so good? And the answer is no.
Hmm.
Eventually, you want to start to change and grow and shift because it's ultimately what will give you a more satisfying and fulfilling life. I'm not going to say yes to everything anymore. I'm going to choose for myself in your case, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yes.
like I mentioned, like first you have to do the hard work of understanding your type some, and then it's about paying attention to what you're thinking, feeling, and doing, like just in your everyday life. So
Hmm.
it's like, okay, let me kind of observe myself
Hmm.
or practice some self reflection, right? So the difference between self reflection is I'm going to think back to what I did in this interaction,
Hmm.
and self observation is I'm observing myself in the moment in this um, whatever it is that I'm doing.
Scenario. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So paying attention to what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. And then eventually you get to the point where you can start to move in the opposite direction, where you
Hmm.
start to go against the habits.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
ultimately, what this does is that it moves you towards the virtue of type.
Hmm. Hmm.
The virtue for type 9 is called right action. And we've been using that term, but
Hmm.
it's actually um, the virtue for type 9 is right action. And it's what happens when the 9 comes awake to themselves and they start paying attention to their own needs. It truly is the waking up.
Hmm.
And wow, when this happens for a 9, they become a powerful force.
Hmm.
So they are some of the most incredible people and have so much influence in their environment.
Hmm.
And it's like almost completely opposite of this indolence of I'm not important, but it's
Right.
it's a pureness, right? It's not
Uh-huh.
a all of a sudden like, in an ego form.
Right.
It's very pure.
Mm-hmm.
So I know from my own experience as a four with the virtue of equanimity, which is the virtue of four is equanimity.
Right.
It's not a state that I'm always in, but I have had glimpses of it. And when remember I went to that retreat last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it was interesting. So like normally in those kinds of environments, I would be a bit emotionally triggered with all of it was
Mm-hmm.
a deep inner work retreat, right?
Right.
Normally,
Yeah.
I would be kind of triggered by all the stuff that was going on. But I just felt super at peace
Mm.
and like just experienced this kind of knowing that everything was going to be okay. I
Mm.
really wanted to be in service to the other people around me. So like really coming outside of myself and not being so stuck inside. But it kind of freaked me out a little bit, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because it's not like my normal state. And so I asked if I could talk to one of the therapists that was there on site, who also happens to be a type four.
Mm.
And she said to me, she said, what you're experiencing is equanimity.
Mm.
She's like, I can see it.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's an older woman who has so much wisdom and has been doing this type of work for so long that I believed her, and it was like such an interesting moment because I really got in touch with what equanimity
Mhm.
felt like. And
Mm.
it was like, wow, it just was so peaceful. And that's what equanimity is. It's an evenness
Mhm.
and not being shaken up by the emotions like I normally am, right? All
Right.
the time. So, um, what if you have like what has your experience been with right action? Like, can you say, yes, I have experienced it and give us an example of that?
Yeah, I want to tag on. I had a little question about your experience of
Yeah.
equanimity. Did you? That's a hard word for me to say.
It is a hard word.
Did you? Did you? So what I suspect is you and hear you saying is this is a really great thing to experience. However, it kind of feels weird because I don't do this on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's not like the normal state
not
that I'm
normal.
in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so having little glimpses of it begins to be like, oh, maybe I can touch into that again. And I do, since that retreat, which was in October, we're now at the end of May.
Mm-hmm.
I have experienced it in this small way, like in short periods of
Okay,
time, you know,
that's what I
um,
was going to ask. Have you been able
and
to
but
touch
not
it
sustained,
again?
right? Like it's not a
Uh,
sustained state
yeah,
at this point for me. I don't know if it ever will be. I hope so.
right.
But I have grown personally, I have grown a lot over
Mm-hmm.
the last few months.
Yeah.
And
And
I'm
doesn't even experiencing it once like give you the hope that, oh, there I could be there again. Like this is
absolutely.
or this is when I'm working to be free of all that other stuff so I can be more this. Like,
Absolutely. And it started for me with understanding what the definition was.
mm-hmm.
Like, I like a cookie. So what is the definition to this word that's hard to say?
Yeah.
Equanimity, right? And when I understood the definition, then it gave me a clue of like, okay, what I could be watching out for as
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my inner work. And that's how I connected with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
Okay.
like, okay, I think this might be what I'm experiencing right now. But honestly, in the moment, I wondered if I was numbing out.
Oh.
Like, am I so triggered that I'm totally numbing out? But that didn't sit totally right with me because
Okay.
I wasn't feeling anxious.
Right.
Like all the other things that kind of go along with I'm going to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think that's why it kind of freaked me out a little bit and why
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask about it. But it started with understanding the definition,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
right?
Kind of with
And
your
so
direct.
do you know what the definition of right action is for you?
Please remind me. be reminded every day.
Yes. So it's action. It's action on behalf of self. So it's
Mhm.
um the sloth is all possible action but the right one,
That's right.
and right action is action on behalf of self. So
Yeah.
like,
I'm serious. I have to be reminded to
yeah,
read that.
no, right? And as I'm recalling, I'm like, I hope I said that right.
No, you did. Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that before.
If not, we'll have to correct it, but I'll put it in the show notes or something if I gave the
Yeah,
wrong
well, there's other
definition.
ways to say it, but that's the gist
Right.
of. That's one good definition. It's a good working
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
of right action.
moving in the right direction with
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do,
Mm-hmm. Yes,
not what somebody else wants you to do,
exactly.
what you want to do. Yeah.
And to the point too of it's not right in terms of there's only one right way to do this. It's not. We're not talking about moral sense. We're talking
No.
about as you have chosen, as you are inspired, as you as a person
Right.
have intended to carry out your intentions with honesty, clarity, purpose. That's what I'm aiming for.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
right.
So like going back to your journal that you've written these ideas in, right?
Mm-hmm,
It's then, okay, revisiting that idea. Okay,
mm-hmm,
what action do I need to take in order to accomplish this goal?
mm-hmm.
Those
Yeah.
those steps can be moments of right action.
Mm-hmm.
So it's movement towards what you want.
Yes. And I am so because I've long written things down, sometimes it might I'm a little mystified by how journaling can be it can actually be just a numbing out procedure. Like I'm doing it I could be doing my own journaling with my own little alone time in place of the right action. So
Yes.
journaling itself isn't a virtue and it isn't always the thing to be done. Um, what is helpful when I do go back to say old journals is, and it reminds me, hey, you wrote this down once. Is that still what you actually want to do? Did you really mean that? And to use that almost as a, clarification or self-examination.
Yeah.
One way I've used
Yeah.
old
And
journal.
I've heard it said before for nines, especially self-preservation nines, which is your
Mm,
subtype,
mm-hmm,
is that because you seek comfort so much,
mm-hmm,
like I'm going to sit in my comfortable chair
mm-hmm,
with my journal that makes me feel
mm-hmm.
a certain way or whatever, right? Is to get uncomfortable physically. Like sit
Mm-hmm.
in an uncomfortable chair
Mm-hmm.
to remove your comfort points. And it's like,
Yeah,
ooh, that sounds yucky,
yeah.
right? But that is going in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
Start looking out for all the ways you pull comfort
Mm-hmm.
in all the areas of your life, right? I
Yeah.
pull comfort in here and comfort in here so that I can stay feeling comfortable and at peace,
Mm-hmm.
and challenge yourself to get uncomfortable, even
Mm-hmm.
just physically uncomfortable.
Right. I would add that's a tiny baby step
And then, I
because
know,
I've done
right?
that and the journaling was still a comfort thing instead of right action. So for me, I actually intentionally stopped journaling for a while because it was because it was like, no chair, no circumstance, under no circumstances do I need to be doing this.
Mhm.
Um, so I did practice that for a little while and I believe it was effective in the sense of if for me to in that instead of the journaling, okay, instead do a meditation, instead do a another self-care item, go get your acupuncture appointment done, like go take action on some ideal that you have been putting off. So I can and to do it let's see, I was gonna say I don't need to always write down my next thing to do. Many times I find that I just need to admit it, feel it, and go do it. Can be one of the most effective ways. Not to
Mhm.
just go be busy, but to stop yourself in the moment and be like, wait a minute, you already know what you need to do. So let's make that phone call
Mhm.
instead of going for
Mhm.
a lovely walk with your toddler,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's those kinds of, for a 9 person ego to say, you know what, ego, you're not going to have the say today. I already know what I need to do, and my toddler can wait, and the TV won't kill him. So we're going to make the doctor phone calls we need to, call the friend I've been putting off, and then we'll go to the park. So in that sense, putting myself first means some of those little things, interrupting the habitual patterns that I have had for years. And you just, again, you just feel it, like this, the energy in your body. And then you have that little tiny sense of, like for you with equanimity, to have, I can feel it when I'm in right action. I'm energetic. It's in my belly. The fire's there, and I'm not, and it has to be when I'm not doing it for somebody, like somebody else's action. I'm not taking on their agenda.
Yeah.
There's a fine distinction there.
Yeah. That was beautifully said. How you just, that was really good, the way you said it. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Like, you're getting there. You're getting there. We're all getting there.
That's right.
At some point.
But, and it's that too, I would like to offer to others to remember that it's not when I first heard right action, I took it as like, oh my gosh, tomorrow I've got to go out and pick the thing that's my right action. And I would kind of overwhelm myself with like, I don't know what that is. Oh my goodness, I need to journal some more on it. And so I probably wasted time just trying to come up with what's the right action, what's the big thing. There's many, and I was at the time in the habit of reading goals books and business books to be like, find your BHAG, your big fat hairy resolution. That was not what I needed to do. I needed to say, again, no, you already know. It's already in there. Go back.
And I think it's important to make sure that people understand that this is a process.
Exactly.
Right? You don't get on the Enneagram growth journey path and just move in a linear line. No growth operates that way. It's not like the treadmill where you just, there's 2 steps forward and 10 steps back sometimes. And it's a process of getting to know yourself.
Yeah.
Through paying attention and then intentionally making small changes that add up over time to some of these bigger concepts that we've covered today. Like, this was pretty graduated content that we covered, and hopefully we didn't lose people on it, but it is possible, and it does work. I've seen it happen in my own life. I've seen it happen in your life and countless other people's lives when they choose to do the work. It works. Yeah.
Well, a great example is, as you've, my own husband has been coached by yourself for a number of months. I don't remember how long, but it's been
almost a little over a year.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, it's been a while, and there's been, I've just seen it's little tiny baby steps of things that he's wanted to change or he's taken action on. And then of course, from the outside, I can see him slipping into old patterns, and I'm here to help remind him, like, hey, remember that thing you talked about in your session? and you told me, and you want to, and so we can help each other. As my point is, it's awesome when both of us as spouses can be involved in any sort of growth, whether it was counseling or coaching or, but in particular with the Enneagram, it's been fun to do that together, but we definitely haven't always been on the same track or the growth pattern. So to have patience with each other.
We'll catch ourselves, going back to old ways.
Yes.
But what I have experienced myself is that the time that it takes me to recognize the pattern that I've in again is shorter and shorter.
There you go. That's it. Yeah.
Right. So it's like what used to maybe take me a couple of weeks to notice I was in a cycle, then an unhealthy cycle or pattern. Now, now it might take me, I don't know, 2 days a day, sometimes even a half day, and depending on what it is, it's like, okay, I can I can sometimes shift out of it in the moment, and sometimes I can't.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Isn't that
what
funny?
what I have learned is what works for me is like if I'm attempting to, for me it's emotions, right? If I'm in a state where I'm feeling very sad or lonely or whatever, and I can't seem to shift out of it,
Mm-hmm.
I just give into it for the day. I
Mm.
just go, okay, like it's just going to be here right now.
Mm-hmm.
But tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to work towards the things that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And before, like sometimes that would put me out for a week, even
Right.
more, where I would take me a long time to get energy again to start working towards the things I wanted to work on because I was just feeling so bad about myself,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean it doesn't still happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't scare me as much anymore. I'm like, okay, now I see what's happening and
Yeah.
I have some power over this.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It empowers you truly to
Mhm.
say, okay, where I'm at right now is to say, that's my normal. My ego habit patterns that's what's going to be my normal. And then my operating system. But now I have I had an awakening enough and is brought to consciousness some of these things that we've learned about fixations and passions to say, at least now I can recognize it 5 times a day instead of
Mhm.
not at all, or
Right.
and to choose to do something about it. It starts giving you that little chink of choosing.
Yeah.
Like now I get clarity of mind. Now I can clear my heart to make better choices as in your true personhood,
Yeah.
not in your ego self that's trying to protect you and keep you locked down. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, this has been such a great conversation,
I
Kelly.
love talking to you, Wendy.
Even though you're on my computer screen, it felt like you were just sitting on my couch.
Yeah.
We were talking and
Yes.
I just appreciate that so much about you. So, but I do want to give you one more opportunity before we close. Like, is there anything else about type 9 that you think people would benefit from knowing?
Mm. Um, yeah, to have patience with themselves, and to know the thing I'm most excited about most recently is that I've learned that my understanding is this. I could be wrong, technically speaking, but that the to see my ego self as a persona, as the kind of the enemy within, not enemy in the sense of it's the thing trying to keep me locked in my little ivory tower of the passions of sloth and of the fixation of indolence. And
Mhm.
once I could grasp that, instead of looking outward, that what I'm really wrestling with is inward, is within my own power, is within my own self. Um, I don't have to blame other people anymore for my woes or misery of life at this moment. I don't have to, have my children act perfect so that my little environment can be perfectly peaceful.
Mhm.
I can be free from, the need to control my external environment, which is a little thing that nines like to do, trying to get their own internal peace. And that doesn't work anymore. It's now my fight, my anger, my energy can rise up and wrestle with that ego self. That if I wanted to, I could give it a name. I've heard some people do that, or I can talk to it. I can be like, I literally catch myself and do that.
Mhm.
And it's super helpful. It's just a helpful way to see that you almost have two people inward, at least two people inside, kind of battling for the territory. Um,
Mhm.
I think body types are a little territorial too. So
Yeah.
it's just easy way to imagine what's going
Yeah.
on. Maybe
Yeah.
for heart types, you would need to imagine your ego in some different sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I have heard that it is useful to give the other, the ego a name. Like
Mhm.
in some way, it's very useful for one. Their
Mm.
their inner critic. This is
Yeah,
this
yeah,
really loud voice that's happening inside of them, always criticizing them. To like imagine that it's separate and
hmm
not quite so ingrained.
yeah.
So,
But it's
um,
not that it's okay. It's just it was a protective factor. It has
yes,
a place, and I'm always going to have it with me, but I don't have to obey it.
Exactly. Right.
Mhm.
Because ultimately you want to be in control.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let it
Yeah.
run the
My
show.
higher purpose.
My higher purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all your examples today and just being so candid with um, our conversation. And
Mhm.
I miss you.
I do
You
too.
know,
Wendy, I love the work you're doing, and
thanks.
please keep at it. I know it's a lot of work and
Yeah.
a lot as you're juggling,
Yeah.
but you
I
have such a way
appreciate
of
that.
listening to people, and I know in your coaching, you are helping others make the progress they need.
Yeah. I hope so. So,
Mhm.
all right. Well, until next time,
Mhm.
we will see you later.
All right, sounds good.
Bye,
Have
Kelly.
bye.